I was sitting at my desk, savoring a mid-morning coffee that my assistant had brought in. Unfortunately, she'd sweetened it with artificial sugar, prompting me to grumble about switching to black tea instead. My mind, however, wasn't on the coffee, but on a pressing copyright issue that demanded resolution. The federal government, predictably sluggish, was dragging its feet in releasing sensitive documents, making progress impossible. Their inefficiency was maddening. Federal employees seemed to dodge responsibility unless explicitly ordered to act. I couldn't help but wonder how many hands a single letter passed through before someone finally took action. Frustrated, I was stuck in limbo, unable to move forward on my next project, with the looming threat of financial losses if certain items had to be scrapped. Compounding my irritation was the surge of liberal bureaucracy, which had turned straightforward processes into convoluted ordeals. Even job titles weren't immune to the changes. Frankly, I felt too old to put up with this nonsense. Just then, Emily Carter, my assistant, walked into my office. "There's a young lady here to see you," she announced. She wouldn't give her name, but handed me this. She placed a photo on my desk. As I glanced at it, an icy wave of dread washed over me. "Son of a cow," I muttered to myself. "Why now?" It was a picture of me and Victoria, my ex-wife, on our wedding day. The photo, now 18 years old, dredged up memories I'd rather have forgotten. Betrayal, heartbreak, and countless tears. People had always assumed I left town back then to lick my wounds, and they weren't wrong. At the time, I had no understanding of money or power, but life had changed me since. Asked her if her name is Madeline or Caroline Harper. I told Emily, handing her a USB drive sealed in a Ziploc bag. "If it's her, show her the video on this. If she wants a copy, give her everything and return the original to me. Then come back, and I'll answer any questions you have." At 42, I had fully embraced bachelorhood. My brief and disastrous marriage to Victoria Claire Alden had destroyed any faith I had in love or commitment. Now, trust was something people had to earn, and that didn't happen often. Standing at 6 feet 4 inches with a 38-inch waist and weighing 200 pounds, I kept myself in shape with 2-hour gym sessions after work. My brownish-black hair was streaked with gray, but I still caught people's attention. Though I had a few casual relationships, marriage and love were firmly off the table. An hour later, Emily returned, leaving the door ajar. Her expression was serious, and she clearly had no intention of leaving until she got answers. Sitting across from me, she fixed me with her piercing emerald eyes and waited for me to speak. "Do you know which one it was?" I asked. "Madeline," she replied. "Who was she? And why was she so shaken?" She said, "We've been lied to our entire lives. If my heart is right, then he was lied to as well." Madeline, it turned out, was one of a pair of identical twins. The video she'd watched was of her mother's final words to me, recorded 7 months before the twins were born. Back then, I hadn't even known Victoria was pregnant. I only learned about the twins through friends after the fact. She had kept me completely in the dark. The USB drive contained documents that laid out exactly what would happen if I ever tried to contact them. Victoria's father, Richard Harper, who was a high-ranking CIA official, had gotten me fired from the FBI with fabricated charges simply because he despised me. He had made it clear I would face severe consequences, even death, if I interfered in their lives. Victoria divorced me to marry my former best friend, a man she'd been secretly seeing for months. To my knowledge, he was the twins' biological father. How did she find me? And what does she want? I asked. Emily explained that Madeline had discovered an old photograph in her attic with my name on it. She had searched for me online, eventually tracking me down through Facebook and other platforms. Her visit, however, wasn't just out of curiosity. She was desperate to find a bone marrow match for her twin sister, who was running out of time. "But why come to me? I'm not their father. It doesn't add up," I replied. "Actually," Emily said, "Madeline suspected something and convinced the doctors to run a DNA test during the marrow compatibility screening. The results confirmed it. Richard Harper isn't their biological father." The weight of her words hit me like a freight train. If what she said was true, then Victoria had lied to me all those years ago. Emily's serious expression softened into a knowing smile as tears welled up in my eyes. I knew she was connected to you the moment I saw her, Emily said, standing. She has your look. It's unmistakable. Taking a deep breath, I made my decision. Emily, send the contents of the USB drive to my publishers. Tell them to release it discreetly in a way that can't be traced back to me. And make sure they don't disclose my pen name. I might still have a target on my back. Get this out to the public immediately, I instructed Emily. We need this information released as quickly as possible. Then find someone who can perform a rapid DNA test and schedule an appointment. If it turns out I am their father, I want solid proof before confronting their mother. Also, contact a litigation lawyer to help me fight for my parental rights. Clear my schedule. I need to head to Caroline's hospital right away. Taking a deep breath, I added, now, I've got to meet Madeline. Bring her in and introduce her. Emily stepped out and called for Madeline. The moment she entered my office, I froze. She looked so much like my younger sister at 16 that I was overwhelmed. My throat tightened, and tears welled up in my eyes as both of us started crying. Emily, sensing the importance of the moment, quietly took a few photos on her phone before leaving us alone. Madeline, you and I have a blood test appointment at 1 o'clock, Emily said when she returned. They've promised to rush the results, and I've charged it to the corporate card. I also arranged for you to meet Charlotte at the Lakeside Grill at 3. We got a private table reserved. Charlotte wants to ensure her kids are taken care of while we share the news, and Madeline needs to see what kind of family we are. As Madeline walked toward me, I could see she was just as overwhelmed as I was. I hugged her tightly, and Emily gently closed the door. The idea that I might be her father was hard to grasp, and it seemed she felt the same. We decided to take things slowly, one step at a time, as we worked to figure out the truth. After ensuring the clinic would email the results, we left the office and headed for a late lunch. During the drive, Madeline shared how she'd skipped school and driven all day to find me, resting only when exhaustion forced her to stop at a gas station. I was furious at her for taking such a dangerous risk, but kept my feelings in check, realizing I was acting like an overprotective dad, a role that felt strangely familiar. When we arrived at the Lakeside Grill, I noticed Charlotte's car in the parking lot. I know we're meeting your sister, Madeline said, but why did Emily set this up without asking you first? You'll understand soon, I replied. You're about to see what Emily and I saw the moment we met you. It'll explain why we're convinced that you and Caroline are my daughters and why I was so stunned earlier. Madeline paused before asking, can I call you Dad? I laughed, smiling warmly. I'd love that. The Lakeside Grill was a cozy, family-owned restaurant known for its welcoming atmosphere and top-notch food. The hostess led us to a private booth immediately. I ordered a bottle of champagne and extra tissues, knowing we'd need them. Charlotte was seated with her back to us. Wait here for a moment, I told Madeline as I approached my sister. Hey, Charlotte, thanks for coming. Charlotte looked up, noticing the smile on my face. You look happy, she said. What's going on? Stand up, I said. There's someone I want you to meet. As Madeline approached, Charlotte turned around and froze, her jaw dropping. They were nearly identical. Long brunette hair, high cheekbones, light blue eyes, and warm smiles. It was like looking at a younger version of herself. Oh my God, Charlotte exclaimed. James, you should have warned me. This is unbelievable. I've known for about 5 hours, Madeline said, her voice trembling. I surprised him at his office. Emily and Dad recognized me immediately. Now, seeing you, I understand why. The server arrived with tissues, seeming to understand the gravity of the moment. Charlotte, wiping away tears, called her husband and our parents, telling them to come quickly and calling it a family emergency. She refused to explain further, saying only, "You'll understand when you get here." My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. The publisher had released the information, and it was scheduled to air on the 6 o'clock news. As we waited, Charlotte's husband and my parents arrived. My father's booming voice carried across the restaurant. There better be a good reason for this, he declared. Charlotte and I stood to greet them. Mom, Dad, Edward, I said, meet Victoria's daughter, Madeline Harper. My mother gasped, immediately recognizing the resemblance. She sat beside Madeline, clutching her hand with pride and joy, while my father, speechless for once, finally murmured, "It's hard to believe, but I see it." Raising his glass, my father made a toast. "Madeline, welcome to the family. You'll always have a home here." Madeline recorded the moment on my phone, saying, "I came here searching for the truth, and today I found it." Meeting Aunt Charlotte showed me what unconditional love looks like. My twin sister Caroline will feel the same when she hears. After the emotional introductions, we shared a meal and exchanged stories. Madeline revealed she had driven her old Voyager van to get here, and my father insisted on replacing it. "You'll pick out a new one tomorrow," he said firmly. "You're not driving back in that death trap." Later, my phone rang. It was Caroline. Her voice trembled as she said, "I saw the video. I had to call." Tears filled my eyes as I reassured her that we would soon have answers. The Patterson family, after all, was bound by loyalty, love, and determination. Blood is thicker than water, and if I wasn't the match, someone else in this family surely would be. The media was ablaze with questions about the revelations I had released. Every major outlet seemed to be buzzing, trying to piece together the story. Meanwhile, I was working to navigate the complexities of the situation while addressing related challenges. The video of 3 generations reunited had answered many questions, but it also raised new ones. I told Caroline's specialist that we were expediting DNA tests to confirm the relationships. I explained that Madeline was staying with my parents and, once confirmed, I would return to see if I could be a bone marrow match for Caroline. I asked for patience and promised regular updates on our progress. Later, Caroline told me that her specialist had reported back about our conversation, reassuring her that we were moving forward. Confronting my past wasn't easy, but I felt renewed. This time, I wouldn't be cowed by Victoria's family's wealth and influence. Armed with truth, evidence, and determination, I resolved to use the media, the courts, and every resource at my disposal, not for revenge, but for justice. I was prepared to take on Victoria, her husband, her parents, and even the federal government if necessary. The next morning, I sat in my office reviewing my schedule to ensure any changes wouldn't derail other priorities. Emily Carter was as diligent as ever, managing tasks and keeping me on track. She obsessively monitored email accounts, questioning me about every detail of the day. To be honest, I didn't mind. Emily's presence was always a comfort, and her natural charm made her an asset. Her piercing emerald green eyes, full lips, and soft features still turn heads, even now. As a single man, I sometimes admired her more than I should, but thankfully, I was discreet. Finally, Emily received the DNA results. She printed the documents, scanned them, and exclaimed, "It's confirmed. You are her father." Without hesitation, she called the lab to send the results to Caroline's specialist and then began vetting litigation lawyers. After a thorough search, she found the toughest attorney in New York arranging a video consultation. The lawyer, impressed with the DNA evidence, agreed to take the case on a contingency basis, confident of a victory. With the DNA proof in hand, the lawyer outlined a strategy to dismantle the court orders that had denied me my parental rights. We would expose Victoria, her husband, and her parents for their deliberate deception. Even the alleged contract on my life, while likely fabricated, demonstrated their attempts to intimidate and control me. The lawyer was confident this would be a significant case, even before considering the government's role in covering up certain actions. I instructed Emily to send a gray, dust-covered box from the office safe to the lawyer. Inside were years' worth of evidence I had painstakingly gathered, proving that Victoria's father had tried to ruin my career and marriage. These documents, collected through layers of bureaucratic hurdles, were the keystone to our case. Meanwhile, the police had released the reunion video, and the narrative quickly morphed into a feel-good story, a runaway daughter reconnecting with her biological father to save her sister's life. The media frenzy was unstoppable. "Mom, it's confirmed. I'm a father. Twice over," I said on the phone that evening. "Thank God," my mother replied. "Be ready to leave at 7 a.m. tomorrow. I'll spread the news. Have you called your daughters yet?" We were now driving to Igo, New York, in a fully loaded 2-year-old Ford Explorer. Madeline and I led the convoy, with my parents following in a tour bus and 33 other vehicles in tow. The Patterson family had mobilized like a tribe. My phone rang, and Madeline answered, putting it on speaker. "You're being tracked by CNN," Caroline said after we exchanged greetings. "There's a tour bus with a sign saying, 'The Pattersons are coming.' One of 141 attendees should be a match." "Well," Madeline replied, "we have DNA proof he's our father. And Dad kept his promise. I've got a new 2-year-old Ford Explorer." "That's incredible," Caroline said. "I never expected this. It's given me hope I didn't even realize I had. This morning I met so many relatives I lost count. It's going to take multiple introductions to remember everyone. First, second, even third cousins, they're all here." Madeline smiled. "I'm so proud. I want to change my last name to Patterson. I never knew families like this existed." Hearing her words brought tears to my eyes. This journey had already transformed our lives. As I considered how to capture this extraordinary experience in my next book, Caroline's voice came back over the speaker. "You've brought everyone together, Dad," she said. "It's overwhelming in the best way." Madeline had to leave the room when her mother suddenly entered. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, noticing the deep emotion on my face. "I saw you get very, very emotional. How do you expect me to feel?" I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. "I just discovered I have 2 daughters who were raised by my ex-wife and my former best friend without my knowledge. One of them is vibrant and full of life, and the other is fighting for her life. Madeline, you're so strong and independent. You moved mountains without even thinking about it, just like I would have. And now, you want to take my name?" Pride filled my voice as I continued, overwhelmed by it all. Madeline teared up. I was so focused on saving Caroline's life that I didn't even stop to think about how this would affect you. I wasn't a good match for her because I inherited a defective gene from our mother. All I've caused are emotional upheavals that will ripple for days. Can you forgive me? For what? For coming into my life and turning everything upside down? I asked, shaking my head. "No, Madeline, that's what living is about. You've given everyone here another person to love, and you've given me the chance to finally be a real dad." Through tears, I added, "Your grandparents adore you. My mother is so proud that seeing her face reflected in yours means the world to her. You and your sister have become her favorites by birthright. She's been spoiling both of you rotten, hasn't she?" Madeline laughed. "She has. We went shopping, and if she got me something, she made sure Caroline got one too. She said she had years of spoiling to make up for. That's your grandmother for you. Trust me, you'll find it impossible to distance her from you." "I've tried," I replied with a chuckle. "Charlotte and my other sisters will be bragging about this for years. By the time they're done, this will be a family legend." Meanwhile, Victoria was struggling with severe panic attacks after watching the live news feed about our arrival. The carefully constructed walls she had built around her lies were crumbling. Caroline, despite her frailty, confronted her mother with renewed strength. "Mom, why did you hide the truth about our real dad?" Caroline asked sharply. When Victoria didn't respond, she pressed harder. "You hid the truth from us. You made decisions about our lives. What gave you the right to play God? If Madeline hadn't found out about him and sought the truth, would you have let me die?" Victoria had no answers. She had never imagined the truth would come to light. Her father, Charles Alden, had hated James from the start and done everything in his power to drive him away. At that moment, Caroline's doctor walked into the room. "We've received DNA from someone who claims to be your biological father," Dr. Reynolds announced. "The results confirm it. He'll be arriving tomorrow with a large group of potential donors. And for his safety, he'll be under guard." "My biological dad is risking his life for me," Caroline said firmly. "Why, Mom?" "To him and his family, blood is thicker than water," Caroline replied herself. "Even though we're strangers to them, I'm family, and family comes first." Victoria, unable to deny the truth any longer, watched the video of my family meeting Madeline. The striking resemblance across 3 generations was undeniable. As she sat there, speechless, a man entered Caroline's room and asked for Victoria by name. When she identified herself, he handed her a thick envelope. "You've been served," he said simply. Victoria collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Caroline, livid, felt no pity. "Mom, why did Grandpa put a contract on my biological dad's life?" she demanded, knowing she wouldn't get an answer. Meanwhile, Charles Alden was served legal papers after leaving a corporate meeting. Sitting in the reception area, he read through the lawsuits. One against him and Victoria for denying me my parental rights, and another accusing him, his wife, and Victoria's father of conspiring to destroy my marriage and career. The evidence was damning, and with the media frenzy, denying it would be nearly impossible. As the convoy of vehicles finally arrived at our destination, Madeline and I prepared for a critical meeting with law enforcement. At the Igo Police Department, I handed Detective Mark Hunter and Agent David Colson a USB drive with all my collected evidence and provided my lawyer's contact information. I was placed under official protection and escorted to the hospital for a blood draw. When I entered Caroline's private room, Sandra greeted me with a surprised smile. "Dad, you're here earlier than I expected." "Caroline, this is our dad, James Patterson," she said proudly. Caroline looked frail, but her bright smile radiated hope. "Susan, they're rushing the results. It should take only 30 minutes. If there's more than one match, the doctors plan to perform a double transplant. My parents are getting tested now, and we'll meet you soon." Caroline broke into tears, and I sat beside her, holding her until she calmed down. Madeline snapped a photo of us, tears of joy streaming down our faces. Soon, Dr. Reynolds returned with the news. My mother and I were perfect matches. Surgery was scheduled for 6 a.m. the next day. "Normally, we'd need parental consent," Dr. Reynolds explained, "but a court order allows us to proceed since neither your mother nor her husband acted in your best interest." Caroline smiled through tears. "Dad made sure there would be no delays. He always puts family first." A security guard entered, alerting us that CNN had just aired a segment revealing my identity as the author of a popular book series. Caroline, Madeline, and the doctor looked at me in astonishment. "You're worth $40 million?" Caroline asked, shocked. My parents exchanged knowing glances. "Son," my dad said, "you've been holding out on us." "They had no idea," I said with a laugh, reflecting on how everyone had assumed I was just an independent corporate financial advisor. "My God, Dad," Caroline said in awe. "I've read all your books. They're incredible." I smiled. After my life fell apart, I had to reinvent myself. Writing became my therapy, and my first book's success was a turning point. From there, it just grew. My stories expose raw truths about the world, society, and morality, whether people like it or not. For the first time in 15 years, I checked into a hospital, this time alongside my mother. Caroline had wanted to share a room with me, but hospital security wouldn't allow it. Instead, Madeline spent the evening running between 3 different rooms, keeping everyone connected. My father, always the communicator, called relatives to keep them updated. Victoria and Charles Alden arrived after work, clearly displeased. Their cold demeanor didn't faze Caroline, who informed them she was being prepped for a double bone marrow transplant in the morning, thanks to a court order. "How is this happening?" Victoria asked, incredulous. "Mom," Caroline replied, her voice steady, "Dad and Grandma Patterson are perfect matches. They're both donating so I can recover fully. By the way, do you know who Jason Blackstone is? He's your favorite author, right?" "Well, Jason Blackstone is actually James Patterson, my biological dad." Victoria and Charles visibly paled. They had hoped the court case would dissolve quietly, but now they realized James wasn't after money. He was after justice. "Mom," Caroline continued, "did you know Grandpa's been in FBI custody all day? You might want to check with Grandma to see if he's home." Madeline and I deserve answers. Meanwhile, in my hospital room, Madeline and I were discussing how she planned to handle her mother when Victoria found her. A knock on the door interrupted us, and a security guard poked his head in. "Mr. Patterson, do you know this woman?" he asked as Emily Carter stepped inside. "Emily," I exclaimed, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to do what I always do. Look after you," she replied. "Dr. Reynolds said you'd be here for at least 3 days, and I suspected you were a match. I booked a private jet, in a hotel using the corporate card. Madeline texted me with a smirk. FYI, she loves you. Raising an eyebrow, I chuckled. The guard returned. Victoria and Charles Alden want to see you. Should I let them in? Only after they've been searched, Emily interjected. What's your relationship with Mr. Patterson? The guard asked. I'm his fiancée. Didn't you see the ring? Emily replied with a playful smile, flashing her hand. Madeline winked at me and mouthed, told you. I couldn't help but laugh as Victoria and Charles entered the room. Dad, don't trust them for a second, Madeline warned. They're just trying to cover their tracks. You don't know the half of it, Emily began. Your dad's lawyer uncovered video evidence showing your stepfather accepting a check from your grandfather as payment to destroy your parents' marriage. In exchange, he would manage your grandparents' finances for a 3% fee. Is that true? Victoria asked, her voice trembling. Yes, Mom, Madeline said firmly. And Emily's more than just Dad's fiancée. She's a master researcher. I trust her more than you. Victoria's face turned ghostly pale as she realized how far the betrayal had gone. I explained, my lawyer has already sent all the video and audio evidence to the FBI, including a letter your father wrote admitting his involvement. His hatred for me ran so deep, he didn't care what it cost or who he hurt to get his way. Victoria turned to Charles. Is this true? She asked. His expression confirmed everything, and she knew it. As Victoria left, she turned to Emily. Don't let anyone manipulate you the way I was manipulated. James, I want to talk to you privately after the surgery. Once they were gone, Emily looked at me, her cheeks slightly flushed. For the first time, I saw her in a new light. Had I been blind to her feelings all these years? Or was I just now realizing my own? Emily, I said softly, we have a lot to talk about. These past few days have been eye-opening for me. I've been living on the sidelines, letting others dictate my life. James, she said, her voice steady, you've always been there for me. When I got divorced, you stepped in and became a father figure to my kids. You've gone above and beyond, taking them to games, trips, and events. You've been more of a dad to them than their own father. But you've been afraid to commit to anything for yourself. Her words hit me hard, but they were true. Gathering my courage, I took her hand. Emily, I've been through betrayal and pain. I've lived in survival mode. But now, I want to change that. Would you let me take you on our first real date? Or is it too late? It's about time, you old fool, she said with a smile, kissing me. I'm texting the kids to tell them we're officially a couple. Later, we visited Caroline's room, where I introduced Emily as my girlfriend. Caroline's joy was evident, and she teased me relentlessly about finally figuring it out. At 4 a.m., my mother and I were prepped for surgery. We supported each other until the moment we were wheeled into the operating room. I stayed awake just long enough to see Caroline's hopeful smile before the anesthesia took over. The medication had taken effect, and when I woke, it was done. The bone marrow transfer was complete. Now all we could do was wait and pray. Dr. Reynolds informed us that the procedure had gone well, but it would take a few hours to see if Caroline's body accepted the transplant. When we got word that it had, relief flooded the room. Most of the family began preparing to head home. Emily, I said with a teasing smile, I must be the worst patient you've ever seen. You're not sick, she replied, shaking her head. But you're like a bull in a china shop, impatient, unruly, and impossible to manage. Keep it up, and you'll ruin your reputation. Emily reassured me that my mother was doing well. Once she was sure I was stable, she handed me my phone. The first texts I saw were from her kids, Tammy and Timothy. When does she get her engagement ring, Dad? And when do we meet our new sisters? I showed the text to Emily. Your kids are sharp, I said with a grin. I told them I was coming to keep an eye on you after the surgery, she explained. That led to a lot of questions, so I told them the whole story. They weren't surprised. They said, Mom, he's always treated us like his own. Most of our friends wish their dads were like him. He's always been our dad. Reading those words, I couldn't help but feel emotional. I guess we'll have a short engagement, I said, half joking. Emily laughed, but her eyes glistened with tears. Have you heard from the twins? She asked. Madeline and their mother are with Caroline, she said. She's doing well considering everything, though she's still groggy from the medication. She's been asking a lot of questions. Apparently, Madeline told her about the pizza party. Caroline can't get over how much she resembles Charlotte and Grandma Patterson. She's already planning a girls' day out with them after she recovers. Finding my pants, I said, sitting up. I want to see Caroline myself, and then check on Mom. The nurses tried to stop me, saying it was too soon after surgery, but I insisted. With Emily holding my hand for support, we made our way to Caroline's room. Her improvement was instantly noticeable. Her complexion looked healthier, and there was a sparkle in her eyes that nearly brought me to tears. Madeline was there as well. "Who are Tammy and Timothy Carter?" she asked. "My children," Emily replied. "They're 13 and 11. "Why?" "I got a Facebook friend request from them this morning," Madeline said. So did Caroline. Madeline handed me her phone to show me the messages. "You both need to read what they sent me," I said, handing it back. She smiled as she read it, then passed it to Caroline, who grinned as well. "I want my phone back," I said, "so I can add their numbers to my contacts." At that moment, Victoria asked to speak with me privately. In the waiting room, she confessed, "James, I had a long talk with my mother last night. She admitted she remembered my father's hatred for you, but she never realized how far it went. My daughters told me they want to finish the school year here and then live with you. They want to change their last name to yours. They said what Charles and I did is unforgivable, and I can't argue with them." I nodded. "You know my family. They wouldn't let me refuse even if I wanted to. I'll gladly take them, and so will Emily. We just need a bigger house. I'll drop the suit against you if you agree to joint custody." Victoria agreed. "The girls are old enough to decide for themselves," she said. "I can't fight this." We returned to Caroline's room, and I turned to Emily. "Looks like we're going to need a house with at least 6 bedrooms." Emily smiled. The girls screamed with excitement, and Victoria, holding back tears, said, "Girls, your father and I agree. You'll get your wish." Emily asked, "James, are you ready for this? A house full of teenagers?" "No one's ever ready for that," I said with a laugh. "But we'll adapt." "Make that 4, Emily added. "Tammy and Timothy want you to adopt them. They've already started signing their names as Patterson." "Call Mar Dalton's office to start the paperwork," I said. "Let the kids know the plan, and we'll start house hunting." Madeline called Tammy and Timothy on speakerphone to introduce herself. Tammy was cautious at first. "Can you prove this? Dad taught us not to trust calls from unknown numbers." Emily intervened. "This is Paul's daughter, Madeline. We're all going to be Pattersons. Caroline and Madeline are changing their last names, and your dad has started the process to adopt you." "Sweet," Tammy exclaimed. "It's about time. How's Caroline?" Caroline, smiling, said, "So far, so good. I'll text you both my number." Later, we visited my parents. They were surprised but thrilled when I shared the news of the girls moving in. "That's not all," Emily added. "Your son has finally decided to make an honest woman out of me." My mom teared up, and my dad grinned. "It's about time," he said. Emily added, "We'll need your help planning the wedding." When asked if we should invite Victoria, I said it might help the girls rebuild their relationship with her and move on from the past. That evening, I fell asleep, emotionally and physically drained. Emily stayed by my side, holding my hand as the news broke. Charles Alden and Christopher McCormick had been arrested for lying to the FBI. The person behind the contract on my life was finally being exposed. The person who had orchestrated the contract on my life turned state's evidence, exposing the web of lies and conspiracies that had destroyed my life. My lawyer released details of my firing from the FBI, prompting an internal review into the agency's conduct. When I woke from surgery, Emily was there to fill me in. Dr. Reynolds informed us that both my mother and I would be discharged the following day. "You'll need follow-ups to monitor your recovery and to get your stitches removed," he said. "Caroline is doing better than expected, but the big question is how her body will respond as we wean her off her medications." My parents decided to stay in the city until Caroline was on the road to full recovery. They planned to fly back with us on the private plane Emily had arranged, while the tour bus began its journey home over the next few days. The media was relentless, exposing the deception, betrayal, and political schemes that had ruined my career and marriage. Victoria's father, Christopher McCormick, became the focus of intense public scrutiny as his manipulations and lies were dissected by the press. Victoria, too, found herself under a harsh spotlight, though many began to sympathize with how deeply she'd been misled. Emily and I headed to visit Caroline one last time before leaving the hospital. Dr. Reynolds was beaming, confident in Caroline's recovery. At the same time, my publisher and I received long-awaited security clearance to release over 1 million hard copies of my latest book within 2 weeks. I had 2 first editions sent overnight. After signing them, Emily wrapped them and hid them in a shopping bag. We made sure Madeline was with Caroline when we entered her room. "Your dad and I have set the wedding date for the first weekend in August," Emily announced. "Aunt Charlotte will be my maid of honor. I was wondering if you two would be my bridesmaids." Caroline's face lit up. "Hell yes," she exclaimed. "Emily, when I first walked into Dad's office, I was terrified. But you immediately recognized me and said, 'Oh, Victoria's daughter. How are we going to handle this?' You stunned me with your acceptance. I'll proudly stand beside you at your wedding. If I can call you Mom." The 3 of them embraced, and I stood back, taking in the moment. Seeing Caroline literally jump out of bed filled me with joy. Once things calmed down, I handed them each a signed first edition of my new book. The dedication read, "To one of the 2 prettiest ladies who call me Dad. With love, Jason Blackstone, James Patterson." Caroline's face glowed with pride. She flipped open the cover, read my note, and burst into tears. "Dad, you've already done so much. I didn't need this," she said, running into my arms. "Before you came into my life, the doctors didn't think I'd survive the week. Madeline knew it too. But she found you, and you brought the family." Madeline added, "Dr. Reynolds said the double transplant saved her. 1 transplant wouldn't have been enough. In the last 6 days, she's gained 10 pounds. How's your mom holding up?" I asked, trying to change the subject. "She's filed for divorce and started therapy," Caroline said. "She's working through years of lies and now understands the hell you went through. She's ashamed and doesn't trust anyone anymore, but she's strong. She'll make it. Rebuilding trust takes time and an act of faith," I said. "For me, it was Madeline walking through my office door. Thank God she did," Emily added with a smile. "I thought I'd die an old maid waiting for you." "Now, girls," Emily said, pulling out her phone, "stand by your dad so I can get some photos. The best one will be an 8x10 for his desk." When we landed back home, we were surprised to see Emily's parents and children waiting to greet us. Sophia and Michael nearly knocked me over with their excitement, and their joy spread to everyone. My dad couldn't stop smiling as he watched them call me Dad. It reminded me of my own siblings growing up. Sophia hugged my mother tightly. "I'm so glad you're going to be my grandma," she said. The next few weeks were transformative. Emily found a 20-acre property with a barn needing repairs. Meanwhile, Caroline returned to school part-time, and I started writing my first fiction book under my real name. My previous works had focused on exposing corruption, but this time I wanted to capture the beauty of family and resilience. Victoria finalized her divorce from Charles, securing alimony and education costs for the twins. As my legal battles progressed, their family began to crumble under the weight of the truth. By the end of the school year, Madeline and Caroline arrived at our new home. When they stepped out of the Explorer, I was stunned. Caroline's recovery was so remarkable that I couldn't tell her apart from Madeline. Michael, playing the role of the protective big brother, carried their luggage as Emily gave them a tour of the house. In my office, 3 copies of my latest book, Unexpected Blessings, sat on my desk. It was a fictionalized account of our family's journey, a celebration of love, redemption, and second chances.